welcome to the deep dive.
Yeah.
We're going deep on AI today. Or this idea of AI for everyone, really?
Yeah.
Is this AI boom going to help everyone, or is it just going to, make the same problems worse?
Right.
We've got a stack of research here, academic chapters, journal articles, even some online think pieces, and they all kind of ask the same question. Is this stuff really for everyone, or are we just going to see the gap between the haves and have-nots get even bigger?
It's a big question, and it's not as simple as just saying, hey, free robots for everybody.
Yeah.
We got to start with, like, what even is AI? I mean, it seems like every company out there is slapping an AI sticker on anything that's got a microchip in it.
Totally. It's
Yeah.
like my toaster oven. It's got this setting for like artisan bread, but it's not like it's actually calling up a master baker for advice. So before we go any further, let's get back to basics here. What kind of AI are we actually talking about?
Okay, so the research we're looking at really focuses on this thing called weak AI, or sometimes they call it artificial narrow intelligence.
Ah.
And it's not about making machines that think exactly like humans, but systems that are really good at one specific job.
So not like robots taking over the world, but more like robots getting really good at scheduling meetings or sorting our emails.
Exactly. The key is learning from information. This kind of AI is all about systems that can take in information, learn from it, and then, use what they've learned to get something done. So think about anything from language translation apps to the algorithms that are deciding what you see on your social media feed.
Wow. So it really is everywhere. But haven't we heard this all before? Like, I remember all this hype about AI back in the day, and then like nothing really happened.
Yeah, you're right to be a little skeptical. One of the sources actually traced the history of AI, and it's like this roller coaster of excitement and then disappointment.
Oh.
They called them AI summers and AI winters. Back in the 70s, one of the big AI guys actually said, hey, we're going to have human-level intelligence in machines within a decade. Well, obviously that didn't happen.
So is this just another AI summer that's going to, fizzle out, or is there something different going on this time? And I guess that leads to the question, is AI for everyone just a catchy slogan, or can this stuff really change things for the better?
Yeah, good question. A lot of the sources say that even though AI has a lot of potential, the people who benefit most are usually the ones who already have a lot of power.
Right.
Like one quote that really stuck with me was, if we're not talking about power, then we're not really talking about AI for everyone.
Ooh, I like that. It's easy to get caught up in all the cool technology, but if the same old problems are still running the show, then are we just making those problems high tech?
Yeah, and that brings us to AI and the economy. One source called it AI capitalism, which kind of sounds ominous, right?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
Because some of the sources say that AI might not solve our economic problems. It
Yeah.
might actually make them worse. Think about job losses and the whole gig economy thing. It's not exactly a pretty picture.
No, it's not. And one source talked about this idea of the platformization of labor, which is a mouthful, but basically it means instead of having a regular job, you're constantly competing with other people for these little online tasks. It's already happening, and AI is making it even more common.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not just about whether people can find work. There was this one story about workers on these platforms in Brazil getting paid in Amazon store credit instead of actual money.
hmm
That doesn't sound very empowering.
No, it doesn't. And it shows how AI can be used to take advantage of workers, especially in parts of the world where there aren't strong labor laws. So it really makes you wonder, are we building a future where work is less secure and less fair because of AI?
Yeah, it makes me think that future of work idea is a lot more complicated than just robots taking our jobs. It's about who has power, who makes the rules, and how we value work in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. And that takes us from the economy to the whole issue of surveillance and control. How's AI being used to watch people and who has access to that information?
Okay, yeah, this is where things get a little creepy. We've all heard about that social credit system in China, right? Where they use AI to track everything people do and punish them if they don't follow the rules.
Mm.
Is that what we're headed for?
It's a scary thought. And even in democracies, there's growing concern about how AI is being used for surveillance. Think about facial recognition technology being used by law enforcement. Is it keeping us safe, or is it chipping away at our privacy?
And then there's fake news and deepfakes. It's crazy to think that during the 2016 US election, those fake news stories on social media were actually more popular than real news from like major news outlets.
It's wild. It makes you wonder, if AI can be used to create such convincing lies, how can we believe anything we see or hear online? And with deepfakes getting even more sophisticated, it's going to be even harder to tell what's real and what's not.
It's like we're losing our grip on reality. But even if we could somehow get rid of all the fake news, there's still the problem of bias built into the algorithms themselves. Can we really say AI for everyone if the systems are already rigged?
This is the big problem of algorithmic bias. It's not that people are deliberately programming AI to be discriminatory, but the data it learns from is often a reflection of the inequalities that already exist in society.
One example that really stuck with me was how facial recognition technology is less accurate when it comes to identifying people of color. And then there was that experiment where Amazon software misidentified a bunch of California lawmakers as criminals, and a lot of them were people of color.
It's a perfect example of how AI can reinforce and even amplify existing inequalities. And what's worse is that a lot of times these biases are hidden deep inside complex algorithms. They're almost impossible to spot and fix.
So it's not enough to just make this technology available to everybody. We have to ask, what kind of world are we creating with it? Are we making things more fair and just, or are we just automating unfairness?
That's the challenge, and there aren't easy answers, but the first step is to acknowledge that these problems exist.
Yeah. Okay. We've covered a lot of ground here, and it's a little bit overwhelming. We started by defining AI, and now we're questioning its effects on jobs, surveillance, and even our understanding of what's real and what's not. So where do we go from here?
Well, before we go down the rabbit hole of despair, let's remember that AI has the potential to do some really great things in the world. We can use it to solve tough problems, make humans even better at what we do, and even create new forms of art and expression.
Okay, yeah. It's not all doom and gloom. There are people doing amazing things with AI, like developing new ways to treat diseases and even fighting climate change. So maybe next time we can focus on that side of the coin.
Sounds good to me.
All right.
Stay tuned for part 2 of our deep dive into AI, where we're going to explore some of the more positive and inspiring possibilities. Welcome back to the deep dive. Last time we got into some of the worries people have about AI, like job losses, surveillance, and AI making inequality even worse. But AI is not just about disruption, it can also be this incredible tool for creating stuff and solving problems.
Right. It's like we're holding this double-edged sword. On one side, all these scary what-ifs, but on the other, the potential to do things we never even thought possible.
hmm
So where do we see that positive side coming through?
Well, one area where the research gets really interesting is healthcare. Imagine AI systems that can analyze medical images like X-rays and MRIs,
Mm.
but they do it way faster and even more accurately than human doctors could. We're talking about diagnoses happening earlier, treatments tailored to each individual person. It could really change how we approach healthcare as a whole.
That's amazing. It's like having this super-powered medical expert working right alongside the doctors, helping them make the best decisions and ultimately saving lives.
Mhm.
Are there any other really big problems AI could help us tackle?
Climate change is another one that comes up a lot. Think about AI systems that can take huge amounts of data about the weather, pollution levels, and energy use.
Right.
We could use all those insights to make our energy grids more efficient, predict natural disasters before they happen, even develop totally new technologies that are sustainable.
So it's like having this incredibly smart assistant helping us navigate the whole climate change mess. Instead of feeling overwhelmed, we've got this tool that helps us make better choices and take more effective action.
Exactly. And that gets to the heart of what a lot of the sources see as the real power of AI. It's not about replacing humans entirely. It's about taking what we're already good at and making us even better, helping us solve these problems that have felt impossible for so long.
Okay, but even with all the good that AI could do, doesn't it also make us question what it means to be human? Like if machines can make art, music, even write stories, does that mean our own creativity is less special?
That's a really interesting question. One of the sources actually talked about this idea of defamiliarizing creativity. Basically, it's about challenging those assumptions we have about what art even is and who gets to be considered creative.
So instead of asking, can AI be creative like a human, we should be asking, what new kinds of creative things might AI make possible?
Precisely. And there are already some pretty mind-blowing examples of AI pushing those creative boundaries. One source mentioned this artist who uses AI to create these incredible visual experiences. It's like watching a painting come to life.
Wow. So AI could actually give us a whole new way to see and experience art. But we can't forget about those potential downsides we discussed earlier. Things like algorithmic bias and how power tends to get concentrated in the hands of just a few. How do we make sure that AI benefits everyone and doesn't just make those inequalities even worse?
That's the big question, isn't it? And a lot of the sources point to this idea of data justice unionism as a possible solution. It's basically about workers coming together and demanding more control over their data and how it gets used.
So instead of just letting all our data be collected and used by these big tech companies, we have the right to say, hey, this information is valuable, and we should have a say in how it's used and who profits from it.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that our data is a form of labor and that we deserve a voice in how it's valued.
So it's like a whole new kind of labor movement for the digital age. But how do we actually make that happen? It seems like such a huge task going up against these massive tech companies.
It's definitely a challenge. But one of the sources argued that data justice unionism isn't just about workers' rights, it's about building a more fair and just society for everyone. It's about connecting this fight for data rights to all the other movements out there fighting for social and economic justice.
That's a really interesting idea. So instead of just trying to fix the technology, we have to fix the underlying social and economic problems that are creating these inequality.
Right. It's about understanding that we all have a part to play in shaping how AI gets used. It's not just up to the tech people or the politicians. We need to have open conversations, demand transparency, and fight for policies that put people first.
So instead of feeling powerless, we can actually empower ourselves to demand that AI be used for good.
Absolutely. And that means thinking critically, asking hard questions, and challenging the stories that those in power are telling us about AI.
So we need to be informed, we need to speak up, and we need to hold those in power accountable for their actions.
Exactly. And we need to remember that AI is not some force of nature. It's a product of human choices and decisions. We have the power to shape how it's used and what kind of future it creates.
All right, we're back for the final part of our AI deep dive. We've talked about the risks, the potential, even how the way we talk about AI kind of shapes how we see it. But I feel like there's still more to uncover.
Definitely, there's always more to explore. One thing that stood out in the research was this idea of AI's materiality. It's easy to get caught up in those abstract algorithms, but we got to remember AI exists in the real world,
Right.
physical systems, infrastructure, all that.
So it's not just this disembodied intelligence floating around in cyberspace.
Exactly. You've got massive data centers that eat up huge amounts of energy and resources. Then there's the whole supply chain for all the materials that go into those servers and the devices we use to connect. And of course, human labor is involved at every step, people mining the materials, people labeling the data that these systems learn from. You can't forget about that.
That makes me think about the environmental impact. All those data centers must have a massive carbon footprint.
Absolutely. One source even called it the dark side of the AI boom. They argue that we can't just ignore the environmental cost of developing and using AI on this scale.
It's almost like we're so excited about the potential benefits that we forget about the real costs. Like,
Yeah.
is having a smart assistant really worth all the environmental damage?
That's a good question, and it makes you think about who's actually benefiting from these advances and who's paying the price. One source used this phrase, digital poorhouses, to describe how AI is being used in social welfare systems.
Digital poorhouses. What does that even mean?
Well, it refers to how AI is being used to make decisions about who gets access to things like housing assistance or food stamps, those essential resources.
So instead of a person reviewing your situation, it's an algorithm deciding. That's a little unnerving.
Yeah, and the problem is these algorithms are often a black box. It's hard to know how they work and what factors they're considering.
And if we don't even know how they work, how can we be sure they're fair and impartial?
Exactly. That's why we got to be critical about how AI is being used, especially when it affects people's lives directly.
Which brings us back to our original question. Is AI really for everyone?
Right. Throughout this deep dive, we've seen that AI can be a force for good and bad. It has the potential to solve big problems, but it could also make existing inequalities worse and create new kinds of injustice.
So where do we go from here? How do we make sure AI is used for good? How do we make sure it benefits all of humanity?
One source pointed to digital humanism as a framework for moving forward. The idea is to put human values at the heart of technology.
So making sure technology serves people and not the other way around.
Exactly. AI should be working towards human well-being, not just corporate profits or more government control.
That makes sense. But how do we actually make digital humanism happen? It sounds great, but can we really change the direction of something as powerful as AI?
It's definitely a challenge. But we all have a role to play. We need to think critically, demand transparency from the people developing and using AI, and push for policies that reflect our values.
So stay informed, speak up, and hold those in power accountable.
Exactly. And remember, AI isn't some mysterious force. It's a product of human choices. We have the power to shape how it's used and what kind of future it creates. We've covered a lot in this deep dive, from the philosophy behind AI to its real-world effects on our lives and our planet.
It's a lot to think about.
It is, but that's the point of a deep dive, right? Exploring these ideas, questioning what we think we know, and coming away with a better understanding of the world.
Well, I think we've done just that. We've gone deep on AI, explored the good, the bad, and everything in between. It's been a fascinating journey.
It really has. If you're interested in learning more, be sure to check out the show notes for links to all the research we talked about. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, be sure to subscribe to the deep dive for more in-depth explorations of the topics that matter.
Until next time, keep diving deep.